Hey guys, as the day's last light gently fades, and the world outside begins its quiet slumber, we're going to embark on another journey tonight. Not a long voyage across oceans, nor a bustling trip through ancient cities. Instead, we'll softly step back in time, not to witness grand battles or magnificent feasts, but to explore something deeply personal, universally familiar, yet surprisingly different in the past's sleep. How did medieval men and women, in a world without electric lights, without modern beds, and perhaps even without our notion of a single, unbroken night, truly find their rest? We'll gently peel back the quiet layers of the medieval night, uncovering the hidden rhythms, the simple comforts, and the silent fears that shaped their slumber. So, allow your mind to drift, dim the lights a little more, and let's ease into the fascinating, forgotten realities of medieval sleep together. Our gentle exploration will unfold across several chapters, each designed to illuminate a different facet of this fascinating, deeply human, yet remarkably different experience. We will begin, quite literally, with the very rhythm of medieval rest, by considering the omnipresent and profoundly significant practice of segmented sleep. This ancient pattern, once common across cultures, served as the silent, guiding current for medieval nights, defining the very flow of their rest. Chapter 1: The Rhythms of Rest. Segmented sleep. Let's begin our quiet consideration by focusing on a concept that might initially feel quite foreign to our modern minds. Accustomed as we are to the idea of a solid block of unconsciousness lasting throughout the night. For the vast majority of people living in medieval Europe, and indeed across much of the pre-industrial world, sleep was not typically a continuous 8-hour stretch. Instead, it was often experienced in two distinct phases, separated by a period of quiet wakefulness. This fascinating and once common practice is known as segmented sleep, sometimes referred to as biphasic sleep, and it was the prevailing rhythm of rest for centuries. Imagine the gentle descent into this natural pattern, as darkness would settle over a medieval village or town. Unmarred by the pervasive glow of streetlights or glowing screens, life would naturally slow. With the setting of the sun, most activities would cease, driven by the practical limitations of firelight, which was both expensive and often smoky. People would retire to their beds relatively early, perhaps shortly after dusk. This initial period of rest was known as the first sleep. It was typically a deep, perhaps slightly shorter, period of slumber lasting for a few hours, perhaps from around 9 or 10 p.m. until midnight or just past. During this time, the body would recover from the day's demanding labor, and the mind would begin its initial descent into rest. Then, often quite naturally, without the aid of an alarm clock or the jarring intrusion of artificial light, individuals would find themselves gently stirring awake. This would be the waking hour, the quiet interlude between the first sleep and the subsequent second sleep. This period of wakefulness could last anywhere from an hour to 3 hours, a tranquil space in the middle of the night. It was a time that feels deeply alien to our modern anxieties about insomnia. Yet for medieval people, It was a normal, often productive, and sometimes even cherished part of their nightly rhythm. It wasn't viewed as a problem to be fixed with elixirs or remedies. It was simply how sleep unfolded. So, what did people do during this quiet, nocturnal interlude? This waking hour was a remarkably versatile space, a quiet canvas upon which the realities of medieval life would gently unfold. For many, especially those with spiritual inclinations, it was a time for prayer and quiet contemplation. Monastic orders, for instance, had well-established routines for night vigils, rising from their beds for the night office of matins and lauds, often around 2 or 3 a.m. For laypeople, too, this was a sacred time, believed to be particularly conducive to direct communication with the divine, as the distractions of the day were hushed and the world lay still. Imagine the soft murmur of recited prayers, the quiet rustle of rosary beads, or simply a silent reflection upon the day's events or the mysteries of faith. This spiritual preparation for the coming day, performed in the profound quiet of the deep night, would have imbued the experience with a sense of peaceful purpose. Beyond spiritual pursuits, the waking hour was also a practical space for quiet work. For artisans, this might mean preparing tools for the next day's labor, or perhaps engaging in intricate tasks that required concentration without interruption, such as fine needlework, mending clothes, or preparing foodstuffs for the morning. For farmers, it might involve a quick check on livestock, ensuring they were safe from nocturnal predators or the chill of the night. For a mother, it could be a moment to tend to a restless child, to quietly nurse an infant, or to simply enjoy a rare moment of solitude before the demands of dawn. It was a time for unhurried tasks, often performed by the dim, flickering light of a rushlight or a small, precious tallow candle, its flame casting dancing shadows on the walls. The management of the hearth fire was another common activity. Fires, essential for warmth and cooking, could not simply be left to burn out entirely. During the waking hour, someone might quietly rise to tend the embers, adding a fresh log or two to ensure the fire would remain banked until morning. This vital task ensured continued warmth through the coldest hours and made it easier to rekindle a strong fire at dawn. Imagine the subtle glow of the disturbed embers, casting a brief, comforting warmth into the chill room, and the soft crackle of fresh wood catching light. This interlude was also a time for social interaction, often surprisingly intimate in its quietude. Family members or even housemates, sharing a bed or a room, might engage in soft conversation, whisper secrets, share anxieties, or plan for the next day. It was a time for unburdening the mind, for quiet intimacy, and for strengthening bonds away from the public gaze of the day. For married couples, this waking hour was a recognized and common time for intimate moments, a natural part of their shared nightly rhythm, free from the distractions of children or daily tasks. The very structure of sleep provided a private space for affection and connection. Sometimes a small, simple meal might be consumed during this waking period. Perhaps a piece of bread, saved from the previous day, or a small drink of ale. This light refreshment would often be just enough to quell a pang of hunger before settling back down for the second, sleep. It was not a grand repast, but a quiet, functional act of nourishment, fitting into the flow of the night. The prevalence of segmented sleep was profoundly influenced by the absence of pervasive artificial light, a concept almost unimaginable to us today. In the medieval world, once the sun set, true darkness descended, a deep, immersive blackness largely unbroken by street lights, glowing electronics, or even widespread household lamps. The only sources of light after dusk were the flickering flames of the hearth, perhaps a few simple rushlights, a rush dipped in animal fat, offering a dim, smoky glow, or expensive tallow candles made from animal fat, also dim and prone to sputtering, or, for the very wealthy, precious beeswax candles, els, cleaner, brighter, but exorbitantly costly. This lack of continuous artificial light meant that the natural cycles of light and dark had a far more profound influence on human physiology and behavior. The pineal gland, which regulates our circadian rhythm, would naturally begin producing melatonin as light faded, inducing that initial period of first sleep. Then, as the deepest part of the night passed and the natural light began its almost imperceptible return, the body would naturally stir, allowing for this period of wakefulness. This pattern, while unusual to our modern sensibilities, might have felt perfectly natural and intuitive to medieval people. It was a rhythm deeply aligned with the environment around them. Without the pressures of fixed work schedules dictated by clocks and continuous illumination, there was no imperative to force a single, unbroken block of sleep. Instead, the night provided distinct phases for rest, contemplation, and quiet productivity. This offers a fascinating contrast to our contemporary struggles with insomnia, which is often framed as a medical problem. For medieval individuals, waking in the night was simply a part of sleep, a normal physiological response to their environment. The very word, insomnia, as a pervasive medical condition, is largely a product of the industrial age, when artificial light extended the waking day and the segmented sleep pattern became inconvenient and was actively suppressed. Medieval people would not have understood our modern anxiety about lying awake in the dark. For them, it was often an accepted, even useful, state. This quiet practice of segmented sleep was extensively documented in historical sources. We find references to first sleep and second sleep in ancient Greek and Roman texts, in medieval literature, in personal diaries, medical treatises, and even legal documents that might refer to events occurring between the sleeps. This widespread mention across diverse sources confirms that it was a recognized and common pattern, not an anomaly. Imagine reading a medieval romance where a character, after their first sleep, rises to write a letter, or a medical text advising a patient to take a particular remedy during their midnight waking. These subtle references are windows into a profound difference in the human experience of rest. The lasting impact of this natural sleep pattern, particularly its gentle, flexible nature, offers a quiet lesson for our fast-paced world, suggests a more fluid relationship with rest, one dictated by the body's natural rhythms rather than external schedules. The medieval night, therefore, was not merely a void between 2 days. It was a structured time, a period of segmented rest and quiet activity, deeply interwoven with the fabric of daily life. As we gently move from understanding when medieval people slept, our curiosity naturally turns to where and how they found this rest. Next, let us delve into the physical realities of their sleeping arrangements, exploring the diverse array of beds, from the humble straw pallet to the elaborate noble chamber, revealing the surprising nuances of medieval comfort and communal living. Chapter 20: Beds of the Past. From straw to silk, the popular image of everyone sleeping on a dirty pile of straw, while true for some, is a broad brushstroke that overlooks a fascinating spectrum of bedding options, each telling a subtle story of social class, comfort, and practicality. Let's begin at the most basic level with the peasant beds. For the vast majority of the population, a sophisticated bed frame with a raised mattress was an unimaginable luxury. Instead, their sleeping arrangements were characterized by simplicity and directness, often involving a straw pallet. Imagine a large sack or a simple canvas bag loosely filled with straw, dried leaves, or chaff, the husk separated from grain during threshing. This humble mattress would be laid directly onto the dirt floor, or perhaps, if fortunes allowed, onto a low wooden platform to offer a small defense against dampness and cold. The advantages of such a bed were its affordability and the ready availability of materials. Straw was a byproduct of the harvest, making it virtually free for those who worked the land. However, these straw pallets also came with significant disadvantages. They quickly became lumpy and uncomfortable as the straw compressed and shifted. Perhaps more importantly, hygiene was a constant challenge. Straw could harbor fleas, lice, bedbugs, and other unwelcome pests, leading to restless nights and persistent itching. It also absorbed sweat, dirt, and odors, becoming unpleasantly pungent over time. Consequently, these straw mattresses needed frequent replacement, ideally every few months, with fresh, clean straw. Imagine the rustling sound of a newly made straw bed, its gentle give, contrasted with the flattened, compacted, and noisy discomfort of an old one. This regular renewal was a necessary chore, albeit often postponed due to the demands of daily life. Furthermore, medieval peasant life was characterized by communal living, and this extended directly to sleeping arrangements. Privacy, as we understand it today, was virtually non-existent. Most peasant homes consisted of a single main room, a versatile space that served as kitchen, living area, and sleeping quarters for the entire family. Children, parents, and sometimes even aging relatives or close farmhands would all sleep together in this one room, often sharing the same large straw pallet or lying side by side on individual, simpler mats. This practice of sharing beds was not uncommon, even among adults, driven by necessity for warmth in unheated homes and by the simple lack of space. Imagine the quiet sounds of breathing, the occasional cough, the subtle movements of multiple bodies adjusting in the semi-darkness, all creating a tapestry of human presence throughout the night. Even the family's livestock, chickens, a pig, or a goat, might share the same warmth and shelter of the dwelling, adding their own rustling and faint animal smells to the nighttime atmosphere. Moving gently up the social scale, we encounter the beds of the artisan or merchant class. These individuals, having more disposable income, could afford slightly more substantial and comfortable sleeping arrangements. Their beds would often feature more robust wooden frames, raising the mattress off the floor. The mattress itself would be an improvement over a simple straw pallet, perhaps stuffed with softer materials like wool, feathers, or even rags sewn into a fabric casing. These offered greater comfort and better insulation from the cold floor. Linens would also be more common, providing an additional layer of softness and hygiene. Imagine the subtle difference in comfort, the slight give of a more substantial mattress, a quiet luxury earned through industriousness. Their homes might have more than one room, allowing for a degree of separation between parents and children, or between family and apprentices. Though full private bedrooms were still rare, the beds of the nobility, in stark contrast, were grand and opulent affairs, designed not just for comfort, but as potent symbols of wealth, status, and power. These were often elaborate four-poster beds, magnificent wooden structures with intricately carved posts that soared upwards, supporting a vast canopy above. The frame itself might be made of expensive, polished wood, perhaps imported oak or even exotic timber. The mattresses would be a world away from straw, typically stuffed with luxurious feathers or down, providing a soft, yielding comfort that cradled the body. These mattresses would be thick, sometimes layered, a true indulgence. Layers of fine linen sheets would then cover the mattress, multiple sheets, often made from bleached and softened flax, providing a pristine, cool surface against the skin. Above these would be an abundance of rich coverings, thick woolen blankets for warmth, sometimes woven with intricate patterns, lavish furs, like ermine, sable, or squirrel, providing unparalleled softness and insulation, also serving as clear indicators of extreme wealth and status. And ornate tapestries, or embroidered cloths, draped over the bed for decoration and additional warmth. Imagine the deep softness of sinking into such a bed, the layers of fabric providing a cocoon of warmth and luxury. A silent world of comfort. Privacy curtains were a distinguishing feature of these noble beds. These heavy drapes, often made of silk, velvet, or rich wool, would hang from the canopy and could be drawn all the way around the bed, completely enclosing the sleeping space. This created a semi-private room within a room, a crucial element in large medieval households where even noble chambers often served multiple purposes and might be occupied by servants or guests at night. These curtains provided not only visual privacy, but also significant practical benefits. They helped to trap heat, protecting the sleeper from cold drafts in often cavernous and poorly heated castle rooms, and offered a degree of protection from insects. Imagine the gentle rustle of these heavy curtains as they were drawn shut, creating a secluded, warm sanctuary from the surrounding bustle and chill. The concept of a dedicated bedroom as a private, exclusive space for sleeping was a gradual development throughout the medieval period. In early medieval castles, even the lord and lady might sleep in the great hall itself, their bed perhaps curtained off, but still part of a communal living space. As castles evolved, separate chambers became more common, but these were still often multi-purpose rooms, serving as reception areas, dressing rooms, and even workspaces during the day. The idea of a room solely for sleeping was a luxury that only became widespread much later. This meant that the challenges of privacy were a constant presence. Servants might sleep at the foot of the bed or in the same chamber, and guests might also be accommodated in the same room, particularly in less grand settings. This pervasive communal living meant that personal space, as we define it today, simply didn't exist in the same way. Communal sleeping was, in fact, a pervasive reality across most social strata, extending far beyond the peasant household. In large noble households, vast numbers of servants and retainers would often sleep together in dormitories or shared rooms, lying on rows of simple beds or pallets. Apprentices would often sleep in the same workshops or shops where they worked, sharing space with fellow apprentices and sometimes the master's family. Monasteries, too, were built around communal sleeping arrangements, with monks and nuns residing in large dormitories, often in individual cells or cubicles, that provided a modicum of privacy, but were still part of a larger, open space. The sounds of shared breathing, the occasional shift, and the rhythmic sleep of many individuals would have filled these spaces. Even medieval inns, catering to travelers, typically offered communal sleeping. Imagine sharing a large bed with total strangers, perhaps fellow travelers. For the night, a common, if sometimes awkward, experience. Records show that travelers were simply allotted space in a bed and might wake up next to someone they'd never seen before and would never see again. This practice was driven by the economics of space and the need for warmth, as body heat provided natural insulation in cold rooms. The sensory details of medieval sleeping spaces are a quiet tapestry of textures, sounds, and smells. The rustling sound of straw as one shifted on a peasant's pallet, or the faint creak of a wooden bed frame. The coarse feel of rough woolen blankets against the skin for the poor, contrasted with the smooth, cool touch of fine linen and the soft embrace of down for the wealthy. The pervasive smells would have varied. The earthy scent of straw and unwashed bodies in a peasant dwelling, mingling with the faint animal odors from livestock sharing the space, the cleaner, perhaps slightly perfumed. Scent of fine linens, furs, and beeswax candles in a noble chamber, mixed with the ever-present undertones of wood smoke from the hearth. The sounds of nighttime would have been different too. The distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of mice in the walls, the gentle breathing of many sleepers in a communal room, or the creak of a distant door within a castle. Each bed, in its humble simplicity or grand opulence, was a testament to the quiet realities of medieval life and the universal human need for rest, shaped by the distinct textures of their time. As we gently move from the physical bed and its immediate comforts, our quiet curiosity naturally turns to the items directly used on and around the bed itself, specifically for warmth and comfort. Next, let us carefully consider the types of coverings and pillows that provided solace during the long medieval night, revealing further layers of practicality and luxury. Chapter 3D. The comforts of night. Coverings and pillows in an age without central heating, and with dwellings often drafty and poorly insulated, maintaining warmth during the night was not merely a matter of comfort, but a vital necessity for survival. The types and quality of coverings used for sleep were, like everything else in the medieval world, deeply indicative of social class and economic status, but universally aimed at trapping precious body heat. For the vast majority of the population, the peasants, laborers, and poorer artisans, the primary covering would have been woolen blankets. Wool was ubiquitous, easily sourced from sheep raised across Europe, relatively cheap to produce, and an excellent insulator. These blankets would likely have been coarse, heavy, and perhaps a little scratchy against the skin, undyed or colored with natural, muted earth tones. Imagine the substantial weight of such a blanket, its rough texture providing a palpable sense of warmth as it settled over the body, imperfectly blocking out the chill of a stone floor or a thatched roof. For those with even fewer resources, a simple cloak or the very tunic worn during the day might serve as the sole covering, offering only a thin barrier against the cold. The layers they wore to bed would also contribute to their warmth, as changing into specific night attire was a luxury. Moving up the social ladder, the quality and quantity of coverings would subtly, then dramatically increase. For wealthier artisans and merchants, woolen blankets might be finer, perhaps softer to the touch, and more tightly woven. They would likely possess more than one blanket, allowing for adjustable layers of warmth. For the nobility, however, the array of coverings transformed into a display of lavish comfort and opulent status. Their beds would be laden with multiple layers of the finest linen sheets, bleached to a pristine white and perhaps embroidered, offering a smooth, cool surface against the skin, especially in warmer weather, and acting as a breathable layer beneath heavier blankets. Above these, thick, high-quality woolen blankets would provide substantial warmth, often woven with intricate patterns or dyed in rich, deep colors. But the ultimate symbol of warmth and luxury were furs. Imagine soft, deep furs, perhaps sable, ermine, squirrel, or beaver, draped over the sleeper. These furs provided unparalleled softness, exceptional insulation, and were exorbitantly expensive, making them clear indicators of extreme wealth and high status. The subtle whisper of fine linen, the comforting weight of wool, and the luxurious softness of fur would have created a cocoon of warmth and tactile pleasure. a silent testament to the Lord's ability to command comfort. Even against the medieval night, the concept of a pillow was also present, though its form and material varied widely. For peasants, a pillow might be a simple cloth bag filled with straw, chaff, the lightweight husks from grain, or dried leaves. Imagine the rustic rustle and gentle shifting of such a pillow as one attempted to find a comfortable position, its slight firmness offering just enough support. These humble pillows, like straw mattresses, would need frequent refilling to maintain their shape and prevent the accumulation of pests and odors. For the more affluent, feather or down pillows offered a dramatically different experience. These would be plump, soft, and yielding, gently cradling the head, a luxurious comfort that spoke directly of wealth. The soft sigh as one's head sank into a down pillow, a subtle indulgence in a hard world, would have been a profoundly different sensation from the rustic firmness of straw. These pillows would be encased in fine linen or even silk, further enhancing the feeling of softness and refinement. Then, beyond the immediate coverings, the very structure of the bed often contributed to comfort and privacy, especially in noble settings. Bed hangings and curtains were a distinguishing feature of the Grand Four, poster beds we mentioned earlier. These heavy drapes, often made of rich fabrics like silk, velvet, brocade, or heavy wool, would hang from the canopy and could be drawn all the way around the bed, completely enclosing the sleeping space. This created a semi-private room within a room, a crucial element in large medieval households where even noble chambers often served multiple purposes during the day and might be occupied by servants or guests at night. These curtains provided not only crucial visual privacy in a communal setting, but also significant practical benefits. They helped to trap heat, creating a warmer microclimate around the sleeper and protecting them from cold drafts that often swept through cavernous and poorly heated castle rooms. They also offered a degree of protection from insects, dust, and even curious glances. Imagine the gentle rustle and muted light as these heavy curtains were drawn shut, creating a secluded, warm sanctuary from the surrounding bustle, chill, and perhaps the quiet presence of other sleepers. The choice of night attire also varied by class and comfort. For many peasants, especially in colder climates, modesty and warmth dictated that they simply slept in their day clothes, or at most, removed their outer layers and slept in a simple linen tunic or shift. The idea of a separate, elaborate nightgown was a later invention for the wealthy. For the nobility, a simple linen nightshirt or shift would be worn, providing a light, breathable layer beneath their sumptuous bed coverings, while complete nudity was likely less common due to concerns for warmth and perhaps modesty in shared sleeping arrangements. It was not unheard of. The primary considerations for nightwear were practicality, warmth, and the ability to easily move about during those common waking hours of segmented sleep. Finally, ensuring sufficient warmth extended beyond just coverings. Medieval homes, especially outside the main hall or kitchen, could be incredibly cold, particularly in winter. Various simple but effective methods were employed to supplement body heat. Bed warmers, which were essentially pans with long handles, would be filled with hot coals from the hearth and gently passed between the sheets to warm the bed before entry. Imagine the soothing warmth radiating through the fabric, a welcome invitation into a cold bed. Hot stones or bricks, heated by the fire and wrapped in cloth, might also be placed at the foot of the bed or near the body for sustained warmth. And, of course, the communal nature of sleeping, sharing a bed with family members or even strangers, provided a very practical and effective method of sharing body heat, a natural form of insulation that was both common and comforting in its shared warmth. The subtle warmth provided by these methods, combined with the layers of blankets, created a sense of protected stillness against the encroaching cold. The sensory details of these medieval sleep preparations are a quiet tapestry. Imagine the tangible weight of wool, the soft sigh of feathers, the cool crispness of linen, the almost regal swish of heavy bed curtains. Picture the dim glow of a fire, warmed bed pan, the subtle warmth radiating from a heated stone. The quiet, domestic sounds of preparing for rest, the gentle rustle of straw, the soft creak of a bed frame, the muffled sounds of footsteps, all contributed to the pervasive atmosphere of a world settling down for the segmented night. These seemingly small details of coverings and pillows reveal profound insight, sense into the physical realities and social aspirations that shaped the medieval experience of rest. Having now gently prepared the medieval bed, ensuring warmth and comfort through various layers and ingenious methods, our quiet curiosity will next consider the broader environment of the sleeping space itself. Let us delve into the profound differences in darkness and light during the medieval night, and the silent, often unseen, fears and realities that might stir in the deep shadows. Chapter 400: Darkness, Light, and the Fear of Night. One of the most striking differences between modern and medieval sleep environments is the pervasive, immersive quality of medieval darkness. In an age before widespread electrification, before the soft glow of distant streetlights, or the ubiquitous hum of electronic devices, night truly descended. Imagine a darkness that is almost absolute, a deep, velvety blackness largely unbroken by artificial light pollution. In a rural setting, away from the faint glow of a few scattered hearths, the night sky would have been a breathtaking spectacle. A canvas ablaze with countless stars, the Milky Way a brilliant river overhead. The moon, in its various phases, would have cast profoundly different shadows, from the bright, almost daylight-like illumination of a full moon to the impenetrable gloom of a new moon night. This profound darkness fundamentally altered the human experience, sharpening other senses. Hearing became more acute, smells more distinct, and the very air felt different. It was a darkness that invited both tranquility and a heightened sense of vulnerability. Against this vast backdrop of natural darkness, artificial light was a precious and expensive commodity, used sparingly and with great deliberation. The primary source of illumination within a dwelling after sunset would be the flickering flames of the hearth fire, providing warmth and a limited, dancing glow that extended only a few feet from its source. For tasks requiring more direct light, people relied on simple, rudimentary devices. Rushlights, perhaps the most common and cheapest form of artificial light for the common folk, were made by dipping the pith of rushes, a type of plant, into melted animal fat tallow. These offered a very dim, smoky, and often sputtering light, burning quickly and needing frequent replacement. Imagine the faint, struggling glow, barely enough to illuminate a small task, and the thin, acrid smell of burning tallow and rush. Tallow candles, also made from animal fat, were a slight improvement but still produced a dim, yellowish light, often smelled unpleasant, especially if made from poorer quality tallow, and were consumed relatively quickly. They were precious and used sparingly. For the very wealthy, beeswax candles represented the pinnacle of artificial illumination. These were clean, burning, produced a brighter, clearer flame, and emitted a subtle, pleasant aroma. But they were exorbitantly costly, often a luxury reserved for religious services or the grandest noble chambers. The very act of lighting a candle or a rushlight was a conscious decision, an expenditure of valuable resources. This meant that most indoor spaces, once the sun had set, would be cast in varying degrees of semi-darkness, punctuated only by these precious, flickering points of light, making the shadows long and deep. Within this environment of profound darkness, the medieval night was often tinged with fear. These fears were a complex blend of both real threats and deeply ingrained supernatural anxieties. The very real dangers were ever-present robbers or raiders who preferred the cover of darkness for their illicit activities. Wild animals, 7 wolves, bears, even stray dogs that might roam too close to human habitations, and the ever-present danger of fire within one's own dwelling, with open hearths and flimsy, often thatched roofs being a constant hazard, especially if embers were not carefully managed. A fire started at night could quickly engulf an entire village, offering little chance of escape in the deep darkness. Imagine the subtle anxieties, the occasional shiver that might run down one's spine as a twig snapped outside, or a floorboard creaked in the quiet house. Beyond these tangible dangers, the medieval mind was also populated by a rich tapestry of supernatural fears that truly came alive in the enveloping darkness. The night was believed to be the realm of various unseen entities, demons, ghosts, the restless souls of the dead, witches, and other malevolent spirits that were thought to roam freely under the cloak of night. People might fear a nightmare brought on by a succubus or the silent creeping of a malevolent presence. These were not mere fairy tales. For many, these were deeply held beliefs, shaping their perception of the nocturnal world. To ward off these spiritual threats, people often engaged in quiet protection rituals before sleep, reciting nightly prayers, like Compline, the final canonical hour of prayer, invoking the protection of saints, making the sign of the cross, placing amulets, such as a seine, Benedict medal, or a piece of blessed wood under their pillows or hanging them near their beds, or using specific religious invocations. The subtle murmur of these prayers, the quiet gesture of a blessing, would have been a common and comforting sound in many homes as the night drew in. The sounds of the night were also profoundly different and often interpreted with a heightened sense of awareness. Without the constant hum of modern civilization, natural sounds would have been far more prominent and distinct. The distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the lowing of cattle from a nearby stable, the baying of dogs, or the unseen scurry of mice in the walls would have formed the acoustic backdrop. But these sounds could also take on a more ominous quality in the darkness. A rustle might be a predator. A distant human cry might signal trouble. In towns, the rhythmic calls of watchmen pacing the streets, announcing the hours and reassuring the sleeping populace, would have been a familiar and often comforting sound, a human counterpoint to the natural quiet. The faint ringing of bells from a distant monastery, marking the canonical hours of the night, would also have been heard, a reminder of constant prayer even in slumber. Every sound in the dark was magnified, its origin carefully, if subconsciously, assessed for threat or reassurance. Security measures for homes and castles, though basic by modern standards, were meticulously observed and profoundly impacted the feeling of safety during the night. Doors would be secured with heavy wooden bars or simple but sturdy locks. Wooden shutters would be drawn across windows to keep out both the cold and potential intruders. In rural settings, farm animals might be brought inside the dwelling or into very close, secure pens to protect them from wild animals and thieves. Their quiet presence and faint animal smells adding to the indoor environment. Castles, of course, were designed fortifications with layers of walls, moats, and gatehouses, but even within them, vigilance was maintained. Guards and watchmen would patrol the ramparts and halls, their footsteps and calls echoing through the quiet stone, providing a constant, if distant, reassurance of protection. Guard dogs would also be common. Their barks a loud alarm against any intrusion. These layers of security, from the simple bar on a peasant's door to the formidable defenses of a lord's castle, aimed to create a sense of safety that allowed for undisturbed rest, though the underlying threats were never truly forgotten. Even natural disasters like storms, floods, or, most terrifyingly, accidental fires, were amplified in their dread by the covering of night. A sudden downpour, the roar of wind, or the crackle of uncontrolled flames would have been far more terrifying. Without the instant, bright illumination and rapid response systems we possess today, people might have awoken in terror. With little time or light to react, the sensory details of this pervasive darkness and its accompanying sounds are crucial to understanding medieval sleep. Imagine the sheer, overwhelming quality of profound darkness, where one's eyes would struggle to discern shapes, forcing reliance on other senses. Picture the faint, struggling light from a single rushlight, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with every draft. Feel the chill that might creep in through cracks in walls, the dampness in the air. Hear the diverse sounds of the night, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustling of straw, the occasional cough from a sleeping companion, the subtle sounds of the house settling, or the distinct, measured footsteps of a watchman. Each element contributed to a night experience that was deeply immersive, often unsettling, yet undeniably authentic to the medieval world, shaping their fears and their sense of security. Having now gently understood the profound darkness and the quiet fears of the medieval night, our journey will next turn to the deliberate routines that people undertook before entering this realm of rest. Let us softly explore the rituals of bedtime, from simple hygiene to heartfelt prayers, that marked the transition from day to segmented sleep. Chapter 5: The rituals of bedtime in our modern world. Preparing for bed often involves a series of often unconscious actions: brushing teeth, changing into pajamas, perhaps a final check of our phones. For medieval individuals, while the specifics were vastly different, the concept of a deliberate winding down process, a series of rituals of bedtime, was equally present, though shaped by the realities of their daily lives, their resources, and their spiritual beliefs. This transition from the active, often arduous, demands of the day to the quietude of the segmented night was marked by practical routines, moments of reflection, and communal warmth. The evening meal, often referred to as supper, played a crucial role in initiating this winding down process. Unlike our often rushed dinners, medieval supper was typically a lighter affair than the main midday meal's dinner. Consumed as dusk settled, it provided final nourishment and a social anchor before the household prepared for darkness. Imagine the gentle clatter of wooden spoons against earthenware bowls, the low murmur of conversation as family members or household staff gathered around a simple table, sharing bread, perhaps a modest pottage or some leftovers from the day. This communal meal was a moment to collectively shed the day's labors, to discuss events, and to simply be present with one another before the pervasive darkness encouraged a retreat into more individual or quieter domestic activities. The warmth of the hearth, often the central feature of the room, would have been particularly inviting during this meal, signaling comfort and security as the outside world grew cold and still. Following supper, the extent of basic hygiene varied significantly across social classes, but some form of cleansing was generally practiced. For the vast majority, this would not involve full immersion bathing, which was infrequent for many due to the labor involved in heating water and privacy constraints. Instead, it was typically limited to washing the hands and face. Imagine dipping your hands into a basin of cool, perhaps river or well water, or having a servant pour water over your hands if you were noble. This simple act would have washed away the grime of manual labor, the dust of the fields, or the soot of the kitchen. While toothbrushes as we know them did not exist, some form of dental care might be practiced. People might rinse their mouths with water or wine, or perhaps rub their teeth with rough cloths or even a mixture of powdered herbs or ashes, which were believed to cleanse. The idea of a daily, thorough mouth cleaning routine was not widespread, so the focus was often on basic cleanliness and refreshing the mouth. Changing clothes was also not a universal bedtime ritual for the common folk. Many might simply loosen or remove their outermost garments and sleep in their tunics or shifts, preserving warmth and minimizing laundry. For the nobility, fresh linen shifts or simple nightshirts would be donned. A soft, clean layer against the skin, after their bodies might have been gently wiped down by servants, perhaps even with perfumed cloths, a profoundly significant aspect of medieval bedtime rituals, particularly for those with strong spiritual inclinations, was prayer and contemplation. The night was viewed as a time of spiritual vulnerability, but also heightened receptivity. The final canonical hour of prayer, Compline, would be recited by clergy, monks, and devout laypeople just before retiring to bed. This office typically involved psalms, hymns, a scripture reading, and a confession of sins, concluding with prayers for protection through the night. Imagine the quiet, soothing cadence of these prayers, perhaps whispered aloud by an entire family or silently murmured by an individual as they settled into bed. It was a moment for personal reflection, for reviewing the day's actions, confessing any perceived wrongs, and preparing the soul for the unknown transition of sleep. This spiritual preparation was believed to be vital for a peaceful night's rest and a safe awakening. A silent conversation with the divine that offered solace against the fears of the dark. Monastic routines, of course, were the most disciplined, with bells signaling specific times for matins and lauds during the waking hour of segmented sleep, intertwining rest deeply with spiritual discipline. The practical necessity of fire management was another crucial bedtime ritual. As the night deepened and temperatures dropped, the hearth fire, the heart of the medieval home, needed careful attention. Before retiring, someone would undertake the vital task of banking, the fire covering the glowing embers with a layer of ash or peat. This slowed the burning process, ensuring that the fire would remain banked until morning, preventing it from consuming all the fuel while also reducing the risk of a dangerous blaze. This ensured continued warmth through the coldest hours and made it significantly easier to rekindle a strong fire at dawn simply by raking out the embers and adding new fuel. Imagine the subtle glow of the disturbed embers, casting brief, comforting warmth and dancing shadows into the chill room, and the soft, almost imperceptible crackle as the fire settled into its banked state, a sound of domestic security. Securing the dwelling was a universal concern, reflecting the real and perceived dangers of the medieval night. Before the household settled into sleep, doors would be secured with heavy wooden bars or simple but sturdy iron locks. Wooden shutters would be drawn across windows to keep out both the penetrating cold drafts and potential intruders. In rural settings, where homes were less secure and wild animals were a greater threat, farm animals might be brought inside the dwelling or into very close, secure pens. their quiet breathing, and faint animal smells, adding to the indoor environment, but providing warmth and protection. For castle inhabitants, while the fortress walls offered ultimate protection, individual chambers would still have their doors barred, and perhaps heavier curtains drawn to create additional layers of security and privacy. This meticulous ritual of securing the home, a final act of defense against the unseen dangers of the night, offered a crucial sense of safety before sleep descended. Within the family or household unit, the transition to sleep often included social interactions that were distinct from the daytime. These were moments of final conversations, storytelling, and quiet intimacy. Imagine family members gathered around the dying embers of the hearth, sharing anecdotes from the day, discussing plans for tomorrow, or recounting traditional tales and legends in hushed tones. For children, bedtime was often accompanied by lullabies, softly sung to soothe them into slumber, or quiet stories, perhaps moral tales or simple fables told in the semi-darkness, creating a comforting auditory backdrop to their descent into sleep. The shared sleeping spaces meant that these quiet interactions could extend to all present, creating a bond of collective vulnerability and comfort as the outside world grew still and cold. It was a time for unburdening the mind, for quiet affection, and for reinforcing familial connections before the body submitted to rest. The sensory details of these medieval bedtime rituals are a quiet tapestry. Imagine the subtle sounds of wooden bars sliding into place, the soft rustle of straw or fabric as someone settles into bed, the muted crackle of a fire being banked, and the gentle cadence of whispered prayers or lullabies. The faint, lingering smells of the evening meal would mingle with the pervasive wood smoke and the subtle human scent of the dwelling. This complex interplay of routines and sensory experiences created a distinct atmosphere, marking the quiet, deliberate transition from the demands of the medieval day to the restorative, segmented rest of the medieval night. Having now gently explored the deliberate routines and comforting rituals that mark the transition into medieval sleep, our quiet journey will next lead us into the inner world of the sleeping mind. Let us softly delve into the fascinating medieval beliefs surrounding dreams, omens, and the mysteries of the unconscious, exploring how these nocturnal visions were interpreted in a world rich with spiritual meaning. Chapter 60: Dreams, Omens, and the Sleeping Mind. In the medieval mind, sleep was far more than a mere cessation of consciousness. It was often perceived as a permeable boundary, a liminal space where the veil between the earthly and the divine, the natural and the supernatural, could become remarkably thin. Dreams, therefore, were not dismissed as random firings of the brain or simple reflections of daily anxieties. Instead, they were often regarded as profound and meaningful experiences, capable of conveying portents, divine messages, or crucial insights into one's physical and spiritual state. The interpretation of these nocturnal visions, known as dream interpretation, was a common practice, a quiet and often serious endeavor that permeated all levels of society. Imagine an individual waking from their first or second sleep, their mind still hazy with the lingering images of a vivid dream. Their immediate inclination would likely be to recall and understand its meaning. This was often done with the aid of popular dream books Eats or Oneirocritica, small manuscript texts, or even simple oral traditions that provided codified interpretations for various dream symbols. These books, often compilations of ancient Greek, Roman, and even Arabic traditions, would offer explanations for common dream elements. Dreaming of water might signify trouble or purification. Dreaming of animals could indicate specific human traits or forthcoming events. Dreaming of flying might mean ambition or liberation. Imagine quietly consulting such a text, its pages perhaps worn from many hands, as one sought to unravel the mysteries of the sleeping mind. This reliance on a shared symbolic language for dreams suggests a pervasive belief in their underlying significance. The religious significance of dreams was particularly profound. For devout medieval Christians, dreams could be powerful conduits for communication from the divine realm. They might be interpreted as direct messages from God, offering guidance, warnings, or prophecies. Much like the dreams of biblical figures such as Joseph or Daniel. Saints were also believed to communicate through dreams, offering solace, instructions for pilgrimages, or revelations of relics. Conversely, nightmares or disturbing visions could be interpreted as warnings or temptations from devils or malevolent spirits, testing the sleeper's faith or trying to lead them astray. Imagine the quiet apprehension or profound comfort that such dream experiences could elicit, shaping one's actions and thoughts upon waking. Monastic communities deeply focused on spiritual life would pay particular attention to dreams, sometimes sharing them with a confessor or spiritual guide for interpretation and guidance. Pasha, believing that the purity of their lives might make them more receptive to divine communication during sleep. Beyond the spiritual, medieval thinkers also recognized a strong medical or humoral link to dream content. As we've discussed, medieval medicine was dominated by the humoral theory, which posited that the balance of the four bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile influenced one's health and temperament. It was widely believed that a person's diet, their daily activities, and their overall humoral balance could directly influence the nature of their dreams. For instance, an excess of hot, dry yellow bile might lead to fiery, angry, or restless dreams. An excess of cold, wet phlegm might result in sluggish, watery dreams. Eating certain foods before bed, or suffering from physical discomfort, air-like indigestion, or a fever, was also believed to manifest specific types of dreams. Imagine a physician asking about a patient's dreams as part of a diagnosis, interpreting them not as random, but as a symptom of an underlying humoral imbalance. This practical application of dream theory meant that dreams were not only spiritual insights, but also diagnostic tools, offering clues about the body's internal state. Folklore and superstition also intertwined with medieval dream beliefs, offering more secular, yet deeply held, interpretations of nocturnal visions. Dreams were often seen as reflecting future events. A dream of finding money might portend wealth. A dream of losing teeth. A common fear might signify loss or death. Dreams of specific animals or natural phenomena could be interpreted as omens for the harvest, success in love, or impending travel. These popular beliefs, passed down through generations, created a rich tapestry of localized dream lore, shaping how ordinary people understood their nightly experiences and prepared for the coming day. Imagine a peasant sharing a vivid dream with family members during the waking hour, seeking collective interpretation and reassurance. A particularly fascinating practice related to dreams was dream incubation. This involved the deliberate act of sleeping in a sacred place, often a monastery, a church, or a shrine dedicated to a saint known for healing or prophecy, with the specific intention of receiving a divine dream. People, particularly those suffering from illness or seeking guidance for a difficult decision, would undertake pilgrimages to these sites, sleep there, and then interpret the dreams they received as direct messages or prescriptions for healing. Imagine a quiet night spent within the cold stone walls of a hallowed place, a silent expectation filling the air, as one hoped for a clear vision from the divine that would offer solace or a cure. This practice highlights the deep integration of spiritual belief, medical hope, and the sleeping experience in the medieval mind. Sensory details of dream life in the medieval period are, by their very nature, elusive and ethereal, yet deeply compelling. Imagine the quiet solitude of the medieval night, conducive to a heightened awareness of the inner world. Picture the stark images that might arise from a mind unburdened by artificial light, perhaps more vivid and raw. Consider the subtle shift from profound darkness to the inner landscape of dreams. A journey into the subconscious, illuminated by medieval beliefs. The sounds would be of quiet contemplation, the soft breathing of the dreamer, perhaps the distant tolling of a bell, acting as a gentle anchor to reality as the mind wandered. Through its nocturnal visions, the feeling would be one of profound introspection, a quiet deciphering of symbols and messages, leaving one with a sense of wonder or purpose upon waking. The medieval approach to dreams, therefore, reveals a society deeply attuned to the inner life, one that sought meaning and guidance in every facet of existence, including the mysteries of sleep. Dreams were not mere ephemera, they were vital conduits of information, shaping religious practice, medical diagnosis, and popular belief, a silent language spoken by the sleeping mind. Having now gently explored the inner world of medieval dreams and their profound significance, our journey will next turn to the external realities that could disrupt this nocturnal tranquility. Let us quietly consider the various disturbances, pests, illnesses, and nighttime threats that often intruded upon medieval sleep, reminding us that rest was not always a peaceful endeavor. Chapter 70: Disturbances, Pests, Illness, and Nighttime Threats. While we might imagine the medieval night as simply quiet and dark, the reality for most was often a persistent symphony of small, unsettling interruptions, both natural and man-made. These were not the occasional disruptions of a modern city. They were the constant background hum of an age lived in much closer proximity to nature and its myriad creatures, and with significantly less control over hygiene and comfort. Let's first gently consider the omnipresent nuisance of pests. In every medieval dwelling, from the humblest peasant hovel to the grandest castle, unseen armies of tiny inhabitants shared the living space, and by extension, the sleeping space. Fleas were ubiquitous, thriving in straw, animal bedding, and the unwashed clothing of humans. Their incessant bites, small but maddeningly itchy, would have been a constant irritant, disrupting sleep with persistent discomfort. Imagine the subtle, unconscious twitching, the sudden urge to scratch as these minute creatures made their presence known throughout the long night. Lice, another common tormentor, particularly head and body lice, would have caused similar irritation, often leading to chronic itching and scalp discomfort. Bedbugs, tiny nocturnal bloodsuckers, would hide in cracks in wooden bed frames or in the seams of mattresses during the day, emerging at night to feed, leaving behind itchy welts and often causing significant sleep disturbance. These pests were not a sign of individual slovenliness, but a pervasive reality of life in an age without effective insecticides or widespread daily washing of bedding. The rustling of straw mattresses would sometimes be accompanied by the faint scuttling of these unwelcome guests. Beyond the biting insects, larger, yet still quiet, intruders often shared the living space. Rodents, primarily mice and rats, were a constant presence, drawn to stored food and the warmth of human habitation. Imagine the subtle sounds of their scuttling feet along floorboards or within the walls, the quiet gnawing on a piece of abandoned food, or the rustle of straw as they made their nests. These sounds, amplified in the deep silence of the night, could easily jar a sleeper awake. Domestic animals, too, frequently shared the main living space in peasant homes for warmth and security. Dogs and cats might sleep near the hearth or at the foot of beds, their soft snores or sudden movements providing gentle background noise. In colder regions or during harsh winters, even larger livestock like a pig or a goat might be brought into the dwelling overnight, contributing their own sounds of breathing, shifting, and faint animal smells to the sleeping environment, adding to the communal, though perhaps less than pristine, atmosphere. These were not considered pests in the same way as insects, but their presence certainly impacted the quietude of the night. Illness and physical discomfort were perhaps the most profound internal disturbances to medieval sleep, amplified by the lack of effective pain relief and the pervasive challenges of sanitation. Without modern analgesics, chronic pain from old injuries, arthritis severs common due to arduous labor, or persistent toothaches would have made finding comfortable rest a daily struggle. Imagine the dull, throbbing ache of a bad tooth relentlessly demanding attention through the quiet hours. Stomach issues, Digestive discomfort from an unvaried diet or food spoilage could also lead to restless nights. Persistent coughs from chronic respiratory infections, common in smoky, damp homes, would interrupt not only one's own sleep but also that of any nearby sleepers. The constant presence of various minor and major ailments, often exacerbated by poor sanitation and limited medical knowledge, meant that for many, sleep was a fragile state, easily broken by the body's own disquiet. The sounds of coughing, groaning, or restless turning would have been common nocturnal soundscapes. The challenges of regulating temperature within medieval homes also contributed significantly to sleep disturbances. Cold was a constant enemy, particularly during the long, dark winter nights. Dwellings, especially peasant cottages with their thatched roofs and unmortared stone or wattle, and daub walls, were often incredibly drafty and poorly insulated. Despite efforts to bank the fire, the heat would gradually dissipate, leaving the interior to plummet to near freezing temperatures. Imagine waking repeatedly from the bitter cold, huddling deeper into thin blankets, or seeking warmth from a sleeping companion. Conversely, in the occasional heat waves of summer or near a large, constantly burning hearth, heat could also become oppressive, making comfortable sleep elusive. The constant interplay between external temperatures and the limited ability to maintain a consistent indoor climate meant sleep was often a battle against the elements. Beyond these internal and domestic disturbances, more significant nighttime threats loomed, casting a shadow of real fear over the medieval night. Intruders, in the form of robbers or raiders, were a constant danger, particularly for isolated rural communities or travelers on the road. The deep darkness provided perfect cover for their activities, and a sudden, violent intrusion could turn a peaceful night into a terrifying struggle for survival. Imagine being roused from a deep sleep by the sound of splintering wood or hushed, urgent voices. The terror of confronting unknown assailants in the dark. In more turbulent times or regions, organized raids by enemy forces or opportunistic bandits could devastate a village, with attacks most often occurring under the cloak of night. For those within the walls of a castle, the threat was diminished, but not entirely absent. While the formidable defenses provided significant protection, internal security was still paramount. Castle guards and watchmen maintained vigilance throughout the night, their rhythmic footsteps echoing on battlements and through quiet corridors, their periodic calls, announcing the hour or a change of watch, would have been a familiar sound, a reassuring signal of ongoing protection, but also a subtle reminder of the potential threats that necessitated such constant vigilance. Guard dogs, trained to alert to intruders, were also common, their barks a loud, effective alarm against any unauthorized presence. These layers of security, from the simple wooden bar on a peasant's door to the elaborate systems of a castle, aimed to create a sense of safety that allowed for undisturbed rest, though the underlying threats were never truly forgotten and often lingered in the subconscious mind. Finally, natural disasters like sudden, violent storms, unexpected floods, or Most terrifyingly, accidental fires were amplified in their dread by the covering of night, a sudden downpour, the roar of strong winds battering the dwelling, or the terrifying crackle of uncontrolled flames from an unmanaged hearth. Or a lightning strike would have been far more terrifying without the instant bright illumination and rapid response systems we possess today. People might have awoken in terror, with little time or light to react, facing destruction in the absolute darkness. The sensory details of these medieval sleep disturbances are crucial to truly understanding the nightly experience. Imagine the subtle, persistent itch of fleas, the constant rustling of unseen rodents, the dull ache of an untreated toothache, or the sharp sting of cold air creeping under a thin blanket. Hear the distant hoot of an owl, the unsettling creak of a house settling, or the sudden, sharp bark of a guard dog. Each element contributed to a night experience that was deeply immersive, often unsettling, yet undeniably authentic to the medieval world, shaping their fears and their fragile sense of security. Sleep, in this context, was not a guaranteed state of blissful unconsciousness, but often a fitful, interrupted, and sometimes anxious, yet ultimately vital, battle for rest against a myriad of subtle and overt threats. Having now gently understood the many external and internal disruptions that could intrude upon medieval sleep, our journey will next illuminate how these challenges and the broader societal structure manifested in the very experience of rest. Let us quietly turn our attention to the fascinating ways in which sleep varied dramatically across social classes, from the humble peasant's shared pallet to the noble's private curtained chamber. Chapter 80. Sleep across the social divide, just as food, clothing, and daily labor differed profoundly across the medieval social strata. So too did the fundamental experience of sleep. The luxury of privacy, the quality of bedding, the degree of warmth, and the level of security varied dramatically, painting a complex picture of nightly life that was deeply intertwined with one's place in the rigid social hierarchy. Let us first consider noble sleep, the most comfortable and private, yet still often less secluded than modern slumber. A lord and lady would typically sleep in a grand, often elaborate, private chamber within the castle or manor house. While we might imagine these as exclusive bedrooms, they often served multiple purposes during the day, acting as reception areas, dressing rooms, or even informal meeting spaces. At night, however, they transformed into a relatively secure and comfortable retreat. The central feature would be their magnificent four-poster bed, as we explored earlier, laden with feather mattresses, fine linen sheets, multiple woolen blankets, and perhaps luxurious furs. This physical comfort was paramount. Beyond the bed itself, several factors contributed to the noble sleeping experience. A team of dedicated servants, overseen by the chamberlain, high-ranking household official, would be responsible for preparing the bed, meticulously making it ready for the lord and lady. Bed makers would smooth linens, plump pillows, and ensure all hangings were correctly drawn. Security was also a key concern. Chambers would have sturdy, barred doors, and guards might be stationed nearby or outside the chamber door. The sounds of the castle at night might include the distant calls of watchmen, the occasional shift of a guard, or the quiet murmuring of servants sleeping in nearby chambers. The greatest luxury of noble sleep was arguably the relative quietude, a reprieve from the constant external noise of the village or the bustling market. Though still subject to the internal sounds of a living castle, their rooms, while cold, were significantly warmer than peasant dwellings, and the bed curtains provided further insulation. The air might carry the faint scent of beeswax candles, costly perfumes, or the subtle aroma of fine linens, a quiet contrast to the smells of common life. Moving to clerical sleep, particularly within monastic institutions, we find a structured and disciplined approach to rest, often dictated by religious rule rather than personal comfort. Monks and nuns typically slept in large, communal dormitories. In early monasticism, this might have been a single open hall with rows of simple beds. Over time, particularly from the 11th century onwards, these dormitories evolved to include individual cells or cubicles, providing a modicum of personal space and privacy. Though still within a larger shared building, these cells were usually small, austere, and often cold, furnished with a simple wooden bed frame, a straw or thin wool mattress, and basic coverings. The focus was on spiritual discipline rather than physical luxury. The lives of monks and nuns were structured around the canonical hours, which meant their sleep was intentionally segmented and frequently interrupted. They would rise for night offices, matins and lauds, often in the very early hours of the morning, around 2 or 3 a.m., to pray and chant before returning to bed for their second sleep. This rigorous routine meant that sleep was often brief, fragmented, and dictated by the ringing of bells rather than the body's natural inclination. Their night attire would be simple habits or tunics. The sounds in a dormitory would be hushed the soft breathing of many sleepers, the occasional cough, the quiet rustle of cloth as someone turned, and then the solemn sound of the bell calling them to prayer. This deliberate disruption of sleep was seen as an act of piety, a sacrifice for spiritual gain, intertwining rest deeply with spiritual discipline and community life. For the burgeoning merchant and artisan classes in towns and cities, sleep offered more privacy than for peasants, but less luxury than nobility. Merchants might live in multi-story houses, often with their shop or workshop on the ground floor and living quarters above. Their beds would be more substantial than a peasant's, perhaps with well-made wooden frames and mattresses stuffed with wool or feathers. As we discussed, they would likely have more and better quality linen sheets and woolen blankets. Crucially, they often had access to more private sleeping spaces, perhaps a dedicated chamber for the family, separate from the shop or work area. This allowed for a greater sense of security and intimacy than communal peasant dwellings. Security would involve sturdy doors and basic locks. The sounds of their sleep might be the muffled sounds of the city at night, distant watchman, the occasional wagon, or the quiet murmuring of neighbors. Their homes, often built of stone or timber, offered better insulation than a peasant's cottage. Soldier sleep, particularly for those on campaign or garrisoned in remote outposts, was typically characterized by harsh conditions and a constant state of vigilance. In barracks, soldiers would sleep communally on simple straw pallets or thin mattresses laid directly on the floor, often in close quarters. Privacy was virtually non-existent, and the sounds of many men sleeping, snoring, or shifting would fill the air. On campaign, sleep would be even more rudimentary, often on the bare ground, wrapped in a simple cloak, exposed to the elements and the constant threat of enemy attack. Vigilance was paramount. Sleep was often fragmented, interrupted by guard duty or sudden alarms. The discomfort from cold, dampness, insect bites, and the lingering aches of combat would have made deep, restorative sleep a rare luxury. Medical care for injuries was basic, meaning chronic pain often accompanied a soldier's rest. Their sleep was primarily functional, a brief respite before the next duty or battle. Finally, the peasant sleep experience, as touched upon earlier, was the most basic and communal. The main dwelling, often a single room cottage, served as the sleeping space for the entire family, parents, children, and sometimes elderly relatives or even farm animals like pigs or goats, particularly in winter for warmth. Beds would be simple straw pallets laid directly on the dirt floor or a low wooden platform. Coverings were limited to rough woolen blankets or the clothes worn during the day. Privacy was utterly lacking. Family members would sleep side by side, their bodies providing communal warmth. The sounds would be of quiet breathing, the occasional shift, the rustle of straw, and the faint, comforting presence of animals. Warmth was a constant struggle, with drafts permeating the structure, making sleep often fitful and dictated by the body's need to huddle for heat. The pervasive smells would be a mixture of wood smoke, human presence, and faint animal odors. Gender differences also subtly influenced sleeping arrangements. While many women shared beds with family, particularly their husbands and children, in larger households, there might be separate sleeping quarters for female servants and male servants. For noblewomen, the bedchamber was a significant space, often the site of childbirth, and, in some cases, the reception of visitors. Women were also typically responsible for preparing beds, changing linens, and ensuring the comfort of the household. A labor-intensive but essential role. The care taken in bed making, from beating straw mattresses to airing linens, often fell to women, ensuring the quality of rest for the family. The sensory details across this social spectrum are stark. Imagine the deep, yielding comfort of a noble's feather bed, the subtle perfume of fine linen, and the quiet security of a private chamber, contrasted with the rough scratchiness of straw, the pervasive scent of animals, and the constant sounds of communal breathing in a peasant dwelling. Picture the disciplined chill of a monastic cell, or the raw discomfort of a soldier's encampment. These profound differences in comfort, privacy, and peace underscore how every aspect of medieval life, including the most fundamental act of rest, was intricately shaped by one's place within society, creating a rich tapestry of nightly experiences. Having now gently explored the vast social variations in medieval sleep, our quiet journey will next turn to the symbolic and cultural significance attached to sleep, dreams, and the transition to waking. Let us quietly consider the deeper meanings of these nocturnal states in the medieval mind. Chapter 9, the symbolism of sleep and waking. In the medieval worldview, sleep was rarely seen as a mere biological necessity, a simple period of physical inactivity. Instead, it was often imbued with profound philosophical, theological, and cultural meanings, acting as a powerful metaphor for larger concepts of life, death, and spiritual transformation. One of the most pervasive symbolic interpretations was the idea of sleep as little death. This was a concept deeply embedded in both religious and philosophical thought. For many medieval thinkers, sleep was seen as a temporary, miniature surrender of consciousness, a brief cessation of worldly awareness that mirrored, in a gentler form, the ultimate surrender of death. Death. Imagine the subtle chill of unconsciousness descending, a momentary separation of the soul from the active body, much like the final, permanent parting. This idea was not meant to be terrifying, but rather to offer a theological comfort. If sleep was a temporary death, then waking was a temporary resurrection. It reinforced the Christian belief in the soul's survival after death and the ultimate promise of bodily resurrection, aligning the daily rhythm of rest with the grand narrative of salvation. The act of falling asleep was a quiet act of faith, a trusting surrender. Conversely, the act of waking was viewed as a rebirth. Each morning, as consciousness slowly returned and the world outside the bedchamber began to stir, it symbolized a fresh start, a spiritual renewal. This was particularly evident in the importance of morning prayers, the canonical hour of prime and terce, which were often the first communal activity of the day in monasteries and devout households. Rising from sleep and immediately turning one's thoughts to God was an act of gratitude for the new day, a dedication of renewed life and energy to divine service. Imagine the quiet sounds of a household stirring, followed by the soft murmur of collective prayer, a gentle reawakening of both body and spirit. This made waking a sacred moment, a daily mini-resurrection, a gentle new beginning bestowed by divine grace. Building upon our earlier discussion of dreams, their symbolic significance extended deeply into various aspects of medieval life. Dreams were not just interpreted as omens or medical symptoms. They were seen as divine or demonic gateways, potent channels through which spiritual forces could communicate with the human soul. This made the sleeping mind a crucial battleground for moral and spiritual guidance. Dreams could deliver prophecies, offering glimpses into future events or confirming divine will, making them vital for rulers and commoners seeking guidance. They could also serve as moral lessons, presenting allegorical narratives that highlighted virtues to embrace or vices to avoid. Imagine a night dreaming of a dragon, which might symbolize a sin to overcome, or a saintly figure appearing to offer guidance. Conversely, nightmares were often attributed to demonic influence, seen as temptations or torments from evil spirits attempting to lead the sleeper astray. This led to practices like invoking protective prayers before bed and placing blessed objects, amulets, relics, or crucifixes near the sleeping space to ward off malevolent dream incursions. The profound seriousness with which dreams were taken underscores the deeply spiritual lens through which medieval people perceived their inner lives and the world around them. The quiet, often unsettling, beauty of the dreamscape was a testament to the permeable boundaries of their reality. The concept of the vigil further highlights the deliberate symbolic use of wakefulness. A vigil was a voluntary period of wakefulness, typically observed during the night, often preceding a major feast day, a knighting ceremony, or a religious fast. It was an act of intentional self-denial and spiritual preparation. Imagine a knight to be spending an entire night awake in prayer before his dubbing ceremony, a silent vigil of purification and dedication, or a devout layperson choosing to remain awake and pray through the night before a significant holy day. This intentional wakefulness was a spiritual discipline, a symbolic act of sacrifice and heightened awareness, a demonstration of devotion that stood in quiet contrast to the natural surrender of sleep. It was a conscious choice to remain alert when the world was otherwise at rest, offering one's waking hours as a form of worship or preparation. Even insomnia, while not understood with our modern neurological framework, was recognized and imbued with symbolic meaning. It was rarely seen as simply a physiological problem. Instead, medieval thinkers often attributed persistent wakefulness to a physical or humoral imbalance. For instance, an excess of hot, dry humors might lead to a restless, sleepless night, much like how specific foods were believed to affect dreams. Beyond the physical, insomnia could also be interpreted as a spiritual affliction, a sign of demonic torment, divine punishment, or a troubled conscience. Imagine an individual quietly wrestling with sleeplessness, believing it to be a manifestation of their inner turmoil or a spiritual test. Remedies for insomnia might therefore include both physical treatments, cooling foods, soothing herbs, and spiritual interventions, prayers, confession, exorcism, reflecting the holistic medieval understanding of human suffering. The quiet distress of sleeplessness was not merely a personal discomfort, but could carry larger, symbolic weight. The bedchamber and the act of sleeping itself were often depicted with rich symbolism in medieval art and literature. The bed, far from being just a piece of furniture, was often a focal point symbolizing privacy, intimacy, vulnerability, and even power. In illuminated manuscripts and tapestries, a noble's bed might be depicted with elaborate hangings, signifying their status and the sanctity of their private space, even if, ironically, servants often slept nearby. The act of sleeping could symbolize innocence, peaceful repose, or, conversely, a moment of weakness or temptation, particularly in allegorical tales. The vulnerability of a sleeping monarch or saint could underscore their humility or their reliance on divine protection. Literature, from courtly romances to moralizing fables, frequently used dreams as plot devices, prophetic warnings, or reflections of a character's inner state, further emphasizing the cultural significance of the sleeping mind. Imagine the visual tranquility of a medieval painting depicting a sleeping figure, often surrounded by quiet, protective symbolism conveying a sense of profound rest or spiritual introspection. The sensory details of this symbolic realm are often subtle and internal. Imagine the quiet transition from the activity of the day to the inner landscape of awareness. As the body drifts into segmented sleep, picture the stark, potent images that might arise in dreams, perceived as messages rather than random thoughts. Consider the feeling of a new day dawning, bringing with it a sense of spiritual cleansing and rebirth. The sounds would be of quiet contemplation, the soft murmur of prayers, the almost imperceptible stirrings of the household, acting as gentle anchors to reality as the mind wandered through its nocturnal visions or prepared for its spiritual reawakening. Each element contributed to a deep, resonant understanding of sleep as a state of profound significance. A continuous cycle of dying and rising, both literally and metaphorically. The medieval approach to sleep and dreams, therefore, reveals a society deeply attuned to the inner life, one that sought meaning and guidance in every facet of existence, including the mysteries of unconsciousness. Dreams were not mere ephemera. They were vital conduits of information, shaping religious practice, medical diagnosis, and popular belief, a silent language spoken by the sleeping mind and interpreted with fervent belief. This rich symbolic tapestry transformed the daily act of rest into a profound spiritual and existential journey. Having now gently explored the symbolic depths of medieval sleep, our comprehensive journey approaches its quiet conclusion. Let us, in our final chapter, bring together all these threads to consider the profound and often surprising culinary legacy of the Middle Ages, and how these ancient practices and lingering myths continue to quietly echo in our own time. Chapter 102 Echoes of Rest. What medieval sleep teaches. Today, as the last echoes of the medieval night gently fade from our imagined chambers and fields, we can now quietly reflect on the fascinating tapestry of sleep we have explored. We have journeyed through the surprising rhythms of segmented sleep, understanding how a divided night was once the norm, with its own productive and contemplative waking hour. We have nestled into the diverse array of beds of the past, from humble straw pallets shared by many to the luxurious, curtained chambers of the nobility, noting how comfort and privacy were deeply intertwined with social status. We then felt the subtle warmth of their coverings and pillows, recognizing the vital role of wool, furs, and even body heat in battling the pervasive cold. Our senses were sharpened by the profound difference in darkness and light, acknowledging the true blackness of the medieval night and the sparse, precious nature of artificial illumination, which, in turn, heightened the very real fears of the night, from common pests to human intruders and supernatural anxieties. We then quietly observed the deliberate rituals of bedtime, and from evening meals and basic hygiene to heartfelt prayers and fire management, marking the conscious transition to rest. Our minds then wandered into the realm of dreams, omens, and the sleeping mind, exploring how medieval people imbued nocturnal visions with deep religious, medical, and superstitious meaning, making them vital sources of guidance and understanding. We also gently touched upon the various disturbances that could interrupt sleep, from the incessant itch of pests and the discomfort of illness to the chilling threat of nighttime intrusions. Finally, we observed how the entire experience of sleep varied dramatically across the social divide, revealing how wealth and status directly influenced one's comfort, privacy, and security in slumber. Through this quiet exploration, we have gently challenged many common misconceptions. We can now quietly set aside the notion that everyone slept in a single, unbroken block through the night. Instead, segmented sleep was the flexible, natural rhythm. We've moved beyond the simplistic image of universal straw beds to appreciate the diverse range of sleeping arrangements. From the basic to the truly opulent, we've understood that while privacy was rare, medieval people developed their own forms of comfort and communal living. And we've glimpsed a world where the darkness was not simply a void, but a powerful entity, shaped by both tangible threats and deeply held beliefs. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of studying medieval sleep lies in its lessons for today, offering unexpected insights into our own modern struggles with rest. In our hyper-connected world, where artificial light relentlessly pushes back the boundaries of night, many people inadvertently experience a form of fragmented sleep, often struggling with insomnia when they wake in the night. The medieval experience of segmented sleep, however, suggests that such nocturnal awakenings are not inherently problematic, but perhaps a natural human pattern that our modern industrial schedules have simply suppressed. Could there be wisdom in embracing a more fluid relationship with rest, allowing for moments of quiet wakefulness, rather than fighting against them? The profound absence of light pollution in the medieval world also invites us to reconsider our relationship with darkness, suggesting a return to more natural light cycles might have a profound impact on our own sleep quality and well-being. Furthermore, the medieval emphasis on bedtime rituals, from winding down with prayer or quiet conversation to carefully managing the hearth, offers a gentle reminder of the importance of deliberate preparation for sleep in our own busy lives. Beyond these practical insights, medieval sleep teaches us about the enduring human element of rest. Despite vastly different conditions, challenges, and cultural contexts, the fundamental human need for restorative sleep remains universal. Whether nestled on a straw pallet or within a silk, curtained noble bed, the desire for comfort, safety, and respite from the day's demands is a timeless constant. The medieval experience reminds us that sleep is not just a biological function. It is a vital period of vulnerability and renewal deeply intertwined with our physical health, spiritual well-being, and social connections. It speaks to the ingenuity required to find peace amidst discomfort, and the resilience of the human body and mind in adapting to challenging circumstances. The echoes of medieval sleep resonate in subtle ways. The very phrase, "first sleep," sometimes appears in older literature, a quiet linguistic fossil of a once common practice. The idea of banking a fire or turning in carries a faint whisper of those historical bedtime routines. Our contemporary struggles with sleep, often linked to stress and overstimulation, may find quiet solace in understanding that a different, more natural rhythm once existed, shaped by the gentle authority of the sun and the moon. As our quiet journey into the medieval night comes to its peaceful end, allow the images of flickering hearths, the soft rustle of ancient blankets, and the silent rhythm of fragmented rest to settle gently in your mind. Feel the quiet calm deepen around you. The subtle wisdom of the past about how to truly rest now softly permeates your awareness. Your pillow is soft, your breathing steady, slowing with each passing moment, easing you deeper into slumber. Let yourself relax fully and completely. Allow the gentle hum of our shared history to lull you into a peaceful, restorative sleep.